I know that members of this committee frequently frame these complicated issues in the form of a simple question. Was there a quid pro quo? As I testified previously, with regard to the requested White House call and the White House meeting, the answer is yes. Mr. Giuliani conveyed to Secretary Perry, Ambassador Volker, and others that President Trump wanted a public statement from President Zelensky committing to investigations of Burisma and the 2016 election. Mr. Giuliani expressed those requests directly to the Ukrainians, and Mr. Giuliani also expressed those requests directly to us. We all understood that these prerequisites for the White House call and the White House meeting reflected President Trump's desires and requirements. Everyone was in the loop. It was no secret. Everyone was informed via email on July 19th, days before the presidential call. As I communicated to the team, I told President Zelensky in advance that assurances to run a fully transparent investigation and turn over every stone were necessary in his call with President Trump. As ambassador, I've had hundreds of meetings and calls with individuals, but I'm not a note taker or a memo writer. Never have been. My job requires that I speak with heads of state, senior government officials, members of the cabinet, the president, almost each and every day. Talking with foreign leaders might be memorable to some people, but this is my job. I do it all the time. My lawyers and I have made multiple requests to the State Department and the White House for these materials. Yet these materials were not provided to me, and they have also refused to share these materials with this committee. These documents are not classified, and in fairness, should have been made available. In the absence of these materials, my memory, admittedly, has not been perfect. A few critical points have been obscured by noise over the last few days and weeks, and I'm worried that the bigger picture is being ignored. So let me make a few key points. First, Secretary Perry, Ambassador Volker, and I worked with Mr. Rudy Giuliani on Ukraine matters at the express direction of the President of the United States. We did not want to work with Mr. Giuliani. Simply put, we were playing the hand we were dealt. We all understood that if we refused to work with Mr. Giuliani, we would lose a very important opportunity to cement relations between the United States and Ukraine. So we followed the President's orders. Second, although we disagreed with the need to involve Mr. Giuliani, at the time we did not believe that his role was improper. Third, let me say, precisely because we did not think that we were engaging in improper behavior, we made every effort to ensure that the relevant decision makers at the National Security Council and the State Department knew the important details of our efforts. The suggestion that we were engaged in some irregular or rogue diplomacy is absolutely false. Fourth, as I testified previously, Mr. Giuliani's requests were a quid pro quo for arranging a White House visit for President Zelensky. Mr. Giuliani demanded that Ukraine make a public statement announcing the investigations of the 2016 election, DNC server, and Burisma. Mr. Giuliani was expressing the desires of the President of the United States, and we knew these investigations were important to the President. Fifth, in July and August of 2019, we learned that the White House had also suspended security aid to Ukraine. I was adamantly opposed to any suspension of aid. I was adamantly opposed to any suspension of aid, as the Ukrainians needed those funds to fight against Russian aggression. I tried diligently to ask why the aid was suspended, but I never received a clear answer. Still haven't to this day. In the absence of any credible explanation for the suspension of aid, I later came to believe that the resumption of security aid would not occur until there was a public statement from Ukraine committing to the investigations of the 2016 elections and Burisma, as Mr. Giuliani had demanded. Finally, at all times, I was acting in good faith. I was acting in good faith. As a presidential appointee, I followed the directions of the president. We worked with Mr. Giuliani because the president directed us to do so. We had no desire to set any conditions. We had no desire to set any conditions on the Ukrainians. Indeed, my own personal view, which I shared repeatedly with others, was that the White House and security assistance should have proceeded without preconditions of any kind.
You confirmed to President Trump Ukraine at the time, and that President Zelensky, quote, loves your ass, unquote. Do you recall saying that?
Yeah, it sounds like something I would say. That's how President Trump and I communicate, a lot of four-letter words. In this case, three-letter.
Classic Gordon.
I don't know.
It's so Gordon.
It's sort of imagine it.
You know, for
So
someone,
Raven.
It's funny. At times, I thought Sondland was trying to portray a familiarity with the president, like in this case, and at other times, he was trying to portray himself as not being. You know, at one point he said, "I didn't support the campaign. You know, I came in and all I was doing was buying inaugural tickets, and all of a sudden I wound up in this job." It was
$1 million.
$1
$1 million.
So at moments it was I want familiar. At moments it was I just showed up here in the last 10 minutes. My first day, basically.
Well, I think you might recall in my deposition on October 14th that I said that very unfortunately I had a bit of a blow-up with Ambassador Sondland, and I had a couple of testy encounters with him. One of those was in June 18, when I actually said to him, "Who put you in charge of Ukraine?" And I'll admit I was a bit rude, and that's when he told me the president, which shut me up. And this other meeting, it was about 15, 20 minutes, exactly as he depicted it was. I was actually, to be honest, angry with him. And, I hate to say it, but often when women show anger, it's not fully appreciated. It's often, pushed onto emotional issues, perhaps, or deflected onto other people. And what I was angry about was that he wasn't coordinating with us. Now, I actually realized, having listened to his deposition, that he was absolutely right, that he wasn't coordinating with us because we weren't doing the same thing that he was doing. So I was upset with him that he wasn't fully telling us about all of the meetings that he was having. And he said to me, "But I'm briefing the president. I'm briefing Chief of Staff Mulvaney. I'm briefing Secretary Pompeo, and I've talked to Ambassador Bolton. Who else do I have to deal with?" And the point is we have a robust interagency process that deals with Ukraine. It includes Mr. Holmes. It includes Ambassador Taylor as the chargé in Ukraine. It includes a whole load of other people. But it struck me yesterday when you put up on the screen Ambassador Sondland's emails and who was on these emails, and he said, "These are the people who need to know," that he was absolutely right, because he was being involved in a domestic political errand. And we were being involved in national security foreign policy, and those two things had just diverged. So he was correct, and I had not put my finger on that at the moment, but I was irritated with him and angry with him that he wasn't fully coordinating. And I did say to him, Ambassador Sondland, "Gordon, I think this is all going to blow up," and here we are. And after I left to my next meeting, our director for the European Union talked to him much further for a full half hour or more later, trying to ask him about how we could coordinate better, or how others could coordinate better after I had left the office. And his feeling was that the National Security Council was always trying to block him. What we were trying to do was block us from straying into domestic or personal politics. And that was precisely what I was trying to do. But Ambassador Sondland is not wrong that he had been given a different remit than we had been. And it was at that moment that I started to realize how those things had diverged. And I realized, in fact, that I wasn't really being fair to Ambassador Sondland because he was carrying out what he thought he had been instructed to carry out, and we were doing something that we thought was just as, or perhaps even more important, but it wasn't in the same channel.
The first four, Elizabeth Warren did the best among this group. Who had the best showing tonight, Roseanne?
Klobuchar and Booker.
Ed?
Klobuchar and Warren.
Klobuchar and Booker.
Booker.
Booker and Warren.
Scott?
Booker and Buttigieg.
Booker and Klobuchar.
Booker and Klobuchar?
Warren and Klobuchar.
Warren and Klobuchar?
Klobuchar and Booker.
Klobuchar and Booker. So it looks like most of you, the highest number is Booker, Klobuchar second, Warren sounds like she came in third here, and Buttigieg had one. One person said Buttigieg? One person said Buttigieg. First of all, why do you think Booker did the best? Who wants to tell us?
He's the most inspiring. He's always working on talking about the issues in a positive manner, and he doesn't do any personal attacking.
We didn't hear Biden or Sanders, two of the front runners. How come no one says anything about Biden or Sanders in a positive way after this debate?
I don't think they really did anything differently than what we've seen in previous debates.
How do you think Biden did, Malone? You picked Biden the first debate, I think.
Right, I
doing
picked
the
him the
best.
first debate, but I mean, for me, Biden was just a little off. I mean, he started mumbling on certain things, so I just kind of backed off.
Impeachment, big issue right now, as we know. First thing that was mentioned during the debate. Thought an interesting point was Amy Klobuchar said our job is to look at each count when talking about impeachment. Kamala Harris said we have a criminal in the White House. Two very different approaches. Which was the best approach in this debate?
Well, Klobuchar for sure.
Klobuchar for sure.
Yes.
So you think that was too harsh with what Kamala Harris said about Donald Trump?
We're still in a fact-finding mode right now.
I mean, the fact is he's not a convicted criminal. That's
Exactly,
a fact,
right.
right? Okay.
But, I mean,
But you think Klobuchar's approach is a better approach?
exactly.
If senators are going to be jurors, they need to at least come into it with an open mind looking at the evidence presented. Otherwise, in a normal jury trial, they'd be struck.
So you think enough was mentioned about the impeachment issue during this debate?
Yes.
What was the most important moment you thought during the debate?
I think the conversation about acknowledging people of color throughout everything, not just during the election season. It came up multiple times.
What do you think, Temple?
I agree. Showing up, making sure that they show up for black women, because black women have continuously showed up at the polls.
Do you want to continue seeing this many people in the debates?
No.
You know, you're going to go to the Iowa caucuses on February 3rd. Is it okay if 10 or 12 people are still in the race?
No.
You want them to leave?
I would prefer that they recognize that nationally it's just not their time and to bow out so that the other candidates can have that opportunity.
So who should drop out?
Andrew Yang.
Anyone else?
Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Stiles.
And Steyer. Okay. Final question for you. I was talking about you were all undecided when we started. Roseanne, have you made a decision?
I have.
You have?
I am planning to call.
Well, just days after giving what has been described as a car crash interview on television, during which Prince Andrew tried to explain the nature of his former relationship with the late financier Jeffrey Epstein, the Prince said on Wednesday in a statement that he would be stepping down from royal duties for the foreseeable future, having obtained his mother, the Queen's, permission to make this decision. Well, just as Buckingham Palace was issuing one statement on behalf of Prince Andrew, the Queen was actually delivering a speech not far from Buckingham Palace, during which she did not refer to the statement and also did not refer to the controversy that has engulfed the royal family since the course of the weekend. Well, in his statement, Prince Andrew makes clear the impact this has had both on his work and also on his family as well. It has become clear to me, he says in the statement, over the last few days that the circumstances relating to my former association with Jeffrey Epstein has become a major disruption to my family's work and the valuable work going on in many of the organisations and charities that I am proud to support. Well, the Prince every year manages to attract the creme de la creme of the British business establishment to an event that he hosts at the Palace called Pitch at the Palace, one which CNN, including many other news organisations, have filmed and had the chance to talk to him about over the course of the years, including myself. But many of those businesses recently, after this firestorm of criticism following this interview, have been trying to distance themselves from the Prince, including big international accountancy and consultancy firms and some charitable and cultural organisations as well. In the statement, Prince Andrew goes on to talk about the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. I continue to unequivocally regret my ill-judged association with Jeffrey Epstein, he says. His suicide has left many unanswered questions, particularly for his victims, and I deeply sympathise with everyone who has been affected and wants some form of closure. The Prince goes on to say, I am willing to help any appropriate law enforcement agency with their investigations if required. Nina Dos Santos, CNN, London.
You got to the president this morning. He's talking about you. Here's what he said.
It's news to me.
You were on Fox, and he tweeted about it. They're going to put up the tweet at some point, but luckily I know what it said. He said, why is Fox wasting time with you? You recently left the primaries. You had a grand number of 0 in the polls. He doesn't even know how that's possible. And then he said to Fox, stick with who got you where you are. Now, I don't care to talk about you and your politics and running for president. Good for you for making a go at it. But what does that tell you about how the president sees that outlet and sees the dialogue that you're all engaged in?
Well, first off, Chris, I have to go on that other network. It's the only way my parents will see me on TV. But second, he's clearly not working. He should not just be focused on this impeachment inquiry. There's other work he can be doing on gun violence, healthcare, prescription drugs.